Welcome to Tech to Table, Growing Cleveland's Future, a 5-part podcast series showcasing the Precision Urban Agriculture Initiative led by the Ohio Aerospace Institute in partnership with Parallax Advanced Research and with financial assistance awarded via 60NANB 24D146 from the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Institute of Standards and Technology. This podcast is produced at Cleveland State University School of Communication in the Levin College of Public Affairs and is designed to inform, inspire, and engage Cleveland's urban farmers, technologists, and community leaders. Each episode highlights the role of innovation in local food systems, lifting up both historical context and present-day tech demonstration projects. I'm your host, Anthony Gillespie, the Director of Strategic and Technology-Based Partnerships and Technology Transfer Office at Parallax Advanced Research in the Ohio Aerospace Institute. I have over 34 years of experience leading programs in technology transfer and commercialization across government, academia, and industry. I'm also the program director on this urban agriculture initiative. In our final episode, Beyond the Garden Bed, What's Next for Cleveland's Food Tech Future, we're speaking with 3 industry leaders about their take on how Cleveland can scale up local food production, advance technology adoption, and build a more resilient, equitable food system for everyone. Let's dig in. I'm excited today to be joined by Kevin Mackey, founder and director of the Urban Farming Initiative, a nonprofit launched in 2020 to transform underutilized urban spaces into thriving gardens, farms, and neighborhood food hubs. Also joining us today is India Johnson, founder and certified drone pilot of UAVistas LLC, an aerial data collections company launched to advance conservation through cutting-edge technology while promoting STEM education among underrepresented communities. And Matt Keri is a senior Development Finance Analyst with Cuyahoga County. He underwrites catalytic real estate developments and business expansion projects and structures public-private partnerships to drive economic growth. So I want to welcome the group and thank you once again for joining us as far as on this podcast here this morning.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. So when we start off, I'm going to start off, Kevin, with you as far as the first question here. Your urban farming initiative has been transforming vacant lots into productive green spaces since 2020. What inspired you to launch this nonprofit, and what gap were you hoping to fill in Cleveland's local food system?
Yeah, thanks for having me today on the show. My background starts with entrepreneurship. So the impetus for me starting the Urban Farming Initiative actually came with my salsa company called Halcyon Salsa, make the best salsas that you've ever had. And so we were selling at a bunch of different farmers markets and producing out of an incubator kitchen that were not even remotely close to each other. So most of my time as an entrepreneur was spent building up my supply chain and making sure that I was where I needed to be at any given moment. And that was tough work. I was working truly, 90 hours a week or so, making sure that I was able to produce and be at the kitchens and get there to the farmers market, sell, be able to wind everything down. It's a lot. And so as the pandemic kind of forced that model to go away for a little while, meaning the farmers markets and that distribution in a lot of our neighborhoods ceased to exist for a moment, my distribution went away as well, but my customers still existed. So my thought process was, if you had something more sustainable and permanent that already existed within the infrastructure of a neighborhood, then even during moments like that, the circularity of a food system can still maintain strength because of people's proclivity and need to eat.
Great. So I'm going to go to India and get a little introduction as far as UAVistas. You founded this company because you wanted to leverage advanced technologies for the environmental good. What drew you to this work, and how did you get into drone piloting?
Thanks for having me, Anthony. And to answer your question, so I love nature and animals and learning about that space, learning about science and natural world since I was a kid. I decided to take a deeper dive into tech in college, learning programming, studying computer science while pursuing my biology degree. I realized I really wanted to apply technology, including my programming skills, to environmental problems. I saw that there was plenty of space for using advanced technology in ecology and environmental conservation, as many of my peers weren't technical. So most of my peers, they weren't programmers. He didn't know Python, he didn't know data science. And then learning all of these things, like a little bit of a lot of things at once, I was fascinated by all the possibilities of how we could apply modern technology, advanced technology in this space. As for drones, I got into drone piloting a little bit more randomly. My second job out of college was with the Cleveland Metro Parks as a GIS developer, and the job description included getting certified in flying drones. I stuck with it, and as I was working there and after, I had found additional applications for drones in the environmental space and wanted to apply them in that space.
Great, great, great. Um, Matt, I'm going to go to you here and learn a little bit more as far as your work in Cuyahoga County. It focuses on financing catalytic real estate and business projects. So, just from your perspective, how does urban agriculture fit into the broader vision for equitable economic development in Cleveland?
Yeah, thanks very much again for having me, Anthony. And according to a 2023 report by IdeaStream, the city of Cleveland alone has about 30,000 vacant lots in the city. That makes up about 6,000 total acres, which is about 1/8 of all the land in the city. And that's only in the city of Cleveland, not any of the suburbs. Now, that land can sometimes be assembled into larger sites to attract industrial or manufacturing businesses, because often compared to regions like Franklin County, where Columbus is, we sometimes struggle to attract larger scale investments. So facilities like Intel or Anduril, and that's because we lack the same number of large development ready sites. Now, assembling land for advanced manufacturing, including like ag tech manufacturers or, who make drones or IoT sensors and other precision agriculture hardware companies, helps to solve that. But most of the vacant lots in the city and the county are scattered and can't easily be aggregated into one site. And so they just sit unused, not generating any meaningful tax revenue, not providing housing, and not providing jobs to people. Urban agriculture puts those lots back into productive use. It creates jobs in neighborhoods. It gives entrepreneurs hands-on experience running a business and often brings fresh food to neighbors that sometimes lack grocery options. I don't think it'll surprise anyone to say that there's significant overlap between high vacancy areas and food deserts. Urban farming helps us to address both of those challenges at once by bringing life and opportunity back into these underutilized pieces of land.
Great, great. Um, Kevin, can you share a little bit more? I mean, your team works on both, community gardens and controlled environment agriculture here. Could you share a story here about a project that really shows the power of turning urban blight into local abundance? And this really builds kind of with what, Matt had mentioned earlier here, just as far as looking at, just the overall, real estate within Cleveland, having a lot of vacant lots here.
Absolutely. So we have a project that's in the Walnut Hills neighborhood in Cincinnati, Ohio. So not directly in the neighborhoods of Cleveland, but 100% applicable, because how we got involved with this project was the redevelopment foundation in that neighborhood had a problem. Their community manager was retiring, and that community manager had been kind of building up this farm network for about the past 7 years. And, he was so central to everything, they did not know how they were going to be able to replace this individual. And so our suggestion, having already been doing this, was hire us as a distributed team to be able to coordinate all the activities that are occurring, simply because by the admission of the individual who is retiring, it really is not a one-person job. And so by understanding that we are hiring a team to do multiple functions, it means that we can start to distribute out different tasks and look at the maintenance and the production of the gardens in a manner that allows for us to take multiple disparate properties, like you had mentioned, but still within a hyper-local, 1 to 2 mile radius. You're just looking at them within 0.25 or so miles of each other. What that gives you, though, is access and distribution points at multiple locations within that neighborhood. It's giving you information. It's letting you reach the neighbors so that they can tell you what do they want to grow? What are they already growing in those raised beds that you're helping them manage because they're coming to your plot rather than doing it in a location that they don't have? Once you have supply and demand information about what exists within your neighborhood, that's actually when we can go and commission our CEA units, our shipping container farms, as we would call them, that grow 24/7, 365. They specialize in things like microgreens, leafy greens, edible flowers, but they can also do peppers and carrots and some other things. But we always have the mantra of we don't just want to produce for the sake of production. That just adds to waste. We want to understand what needs to be produced. And typically, by having the boots on the ground in the gardens, you're able to have a deeper understanding of what does that localized supply chain look like, especially as you're starting to talk to other food entrepreneurs, which, again, is kind of part of my essence and reason to exist. If we can get the food, the raw materials that those entrepreneurs need, most people within neighborhoods actually aren't, taking the raw materials from the gardens and cooking for themselves. A lot of the time, it might be a grandmother, a parent, or somebody else. But if you have the food entrepreneur that's able to do that at a price point that's equal to or lower than what they'd already be paying for maybe the bag of chips or something at the convenience store, that's when you are giving different options. And those options are hyper local to your neighborhood.
Yeah. Kevin, before I jump to the next question here with India, I'm just curious, how did one of the things that you hit upon here was key is, the information that you're getting from boots on the ground in the community. How did you really establish that network? I think this is something here that our listeners would be interested in here in the greater Cleveland area, Northeast Ohio area, as they continue to develop efforts. I know we have some activity here going on, but also you're mentioning about how you're bringing folks together within the community and really kind of creating a cluster activity to really help meet the needs of the supply demand chain that's available here. So I'm just curious here. It'll be helpful just to get some insight there.
Totally. As we got started in 2020, it was an idea of noticing how things were coming together and how space was available, as multiple people on this podcast have already identified. But who's doing what with them started to become our question. We wanted to formalize a model around it. So we actually went through that year, the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste from Kroger and an organization called Flywheel. We went through their sustainability accelerator. And part of the accelerator just prompts you to ask questions of a lot of people. And every conversation that we would have with a local community partner, they would tell us 2 or 3 other local community partners or people that we needed to talk to. And it just became this never-ending web where we kind of realized at multiple points we were in the middle of the web or we were on the edge of the web. And it was like, well, that's happening because of the nature of how often neighborhood-based organizations get started, but don't necessarily have, understandably, the reason or the time to look up and out to the other organizations. So as we started to look at how many organizations in our local area, Cincinnati, but I can assure you it's the same in Cleveland and every other city that the listeners or neighborhood, there's already stuff happening. We didn't have to start anything. We actually were already joining something. So that's why we use the word coordinate a lot. Because if we're helping coordinate and we're always looking at ways to partner, it means that at some point you do become a centralizing force for things like data, shared services, volunteer coordination, and just quite frankly, information that you're hearing from multiple aspects of the community that you're just like, hey, yo, did you know that this thing is actually happening? And of course, a lot of times people will not have any idea what's happening in either their other neighborhoods or other adjacent organizations like climate organizations, how much overlap there is between that and food, how much overlap there is between food insecurity and crime prevention and, teenage access and programming. So that's where we are starting to see and make suggestions that kind of turn us into project managers that have a capability in urban farming and controlled environment agriculture to get that flywheel started. And then once we're noticing that we're a participant in the community, we can become further entrenched in what exactly we're growing because we have that information, and we become further a gap filler for what doesn't exist as you bring more and more people into the network.
Yeah. And you hit a key point as far as really looking at agricultural efforts in particular, as far as urban ag, we're seeing here in the greater Cleveland area, and the role that Parallax is playing is kind of similar to the role you're playing there in the Cincinnati area, where we're facilitating between the supply side and the demand side here. But other partners, as you mentioned, in this ecosystem here, India, the work that India is doing as far as with UAVistas here, really, can play a valuable role as far as looking at the data piece. And I know some of her work involves looking at, the use of drones potentially for urban ag. And so India, can you paint a picture here just to kind of drill down? Kevin mentioned earlier as far as the data piece. But can you mention, as far as just from the work that you do for your company and just others, how can, area data really help farmers, and, it could be urban farmers, but farmers in general, as far as grow more efficiently in the city?
Hmm. So even though like with urban farms, we're often dealing with smaller areas, data that farmers need is the same. So is the soil healthy? Um, how healthy are our crops? How sick are our crops? Is there enough fertilizer? Is there enough water? Are there pests? A lot of this is the same across all kinds of farmers, in large areas or small. So the same data that helps big farms can help small farms too. Also, taking a snapshot in time that captures all or most of an urban farm can be a valuable tool, especially for tracking those metrics over time and getting big picture data. So, what does my whole farm look like at any given moment? But also individual plants. So, you can actually track individual plants a lot more easily at those smaller scales. And even something as simple as planning the structure of a farm before planting via aerial imagery and 3D reconstruction is very helpful. And I've seen this. So they'll take a drone, they'll take it up in the air, they'll fly, they'll do a mapping. So they'll do a 2D reconstruction or a 3D reconstruction, which would be really helpful if you're planning a more complex garden, which I might get to talk about a little bit more later. And then you're planning things out in this more complex space, in this urban space that's not as simple as a really, really large flat field. So that's just a few of the ways that aerial data, drones can be helpful with urban farming and other kinds of farming.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure it also depends upon really kind of the makeup of the land here. I'm sure there's certain areas that, it may be a little more hilly, which probably in the Cleveland area, we don't see it as much unless you go to the outer extremes further east, further west. But within Cleveland, it may not be as prevalent. But those are can make a difference as far as how you farm as well. Um, I guess one of the areas, India, that you didn't mention that we've heard from some of the farmers is just dealing with pests, and how, could aerial drones help as far as anticipating the prevalence of pests here as well. And so that's one topic that has come up when I've talked to a few urban farmers just in our interviews here.
And that's something I've seen a lot more with larger farms. So one of the trends with drones that I've seen over the years is like bigger drones. We go from there's that average size drone to bigger, bigger, bigger. Pretty sure at some point, well, I'm pretty sure we already have them. Just drones the size of planes, just automated planes. But a lot of what I see in terms of pest control is spraying pesticide, also spraying herbicide, sometimes spraying liquid fertilizer on these very large drones, that can carry 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds, when they're going out and spraying these large fields. I've heard of a few companies, they were EU based, so I don't know how many are in the US, where they've adapted that to pest control for smaller farms, for even greenhouses. So instead of making the drones bigger, making the drones smaller so that they're feasible for urban farms or even feasible for a greenhouse. So, you have a particular pest like spotted lanternfly, which is everywhere now. And then you train these computer vision models. Say, hey, I can identify a spotted lanternfly, whatever life stage it's in. It can track it and then it can kill it. And these are teeny tiny drones that could actually be useful in indoor growing spaces and then also small outdoor growing spaces. And I think that's something that we're going to see more of soon.
Yeah. And so you mentioned as far as, I mean, one of the things I want to emphasize here, there's opportunities that are emerging as far as when you look at really the urban agricultural, marketplace here, just because of the growth that you're seeing. And so there's opportunities for innovation here. That's one of the areas that we work with as far as on the supply side is really, reaching out to founders such as your company and others and helping them bring their technology solutions to really, urban farmers and farmers in general to help them really increase their yield and really their productivity there. So you just mentioned their process here and really opportunities. And it kind of goes back to what Kevin said earlier, how entrepreneurship is not necessarily always just the direct result of farming itself, but it's creating some indirect opportunities as well from the innovations and then also looking at the overall supply chain that can be involved with respect to urban agriculture as well. So Matt, kind of looking more as far as your position, you've worked in the public and private sectors here, but really, you can give us some insight as far as really this infrastructure piece. You mentioned earlier as far as, the vacant lots here in the city of Cleveland, a lot of vacant lots here, across the area. In most cases, then they're spread out over the region. You said there's over 30,000 that's available, but what kind of tools, as far as economic development tools, like tax incentives or public-private partnerships can be used to help scale up the local food infrastructure or help maybe someone who wants to get involved in the industry take advantage of these lots to start doing some urban farming here. Could you share more?
Yeah, so there are economic development tools that can support food systems across the entire value chain, from farm to fridge. Those can include grants, low interest loan, tax abatements, TIF, public land sales. The full suite of economic development tools can be used to support this industry. So, for example, here in Northeast Ohio, the city of Cleveland runs a grant program called Gardening for Greenbacks, which provides grant funding to urban farmers to purchase machinery and equipment that they need to set up urban farms. At the county level, we often work with private partners, including organizations like Jumpstart. Jumpstart's a nonprofit venture development organization that provides early stage VC funding and technical assistance to entrepreneurs. I would strongly encourage any listeners who are developing food or agricultural technologies to check them out. More broadly, tools like public-private partnerships can be used to build out infrastructure like shared use kitchens, food hubs, or processing facilities. And an example of this, which comes to mind, is Centrovia in Cleveland's Clark Fulton neighborhood, where they have a commercial kitchen who helps specifically Latino and Hispanic type food companies get started. And there are resources available out there in the community. You just have to know where to look.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Matt, one thing I'm just going to quick add on for us, Parallax Advanced Research collaborates with Jumpstart as far as some of their tech innovation and entrepreneurial support efforts here. So we're very familiar with them. So folks, Matt mentioned as far as they can be actually a point of contact, but we can as well as far as helping you find the resources and support from a tech innovation standpoint. Definitely, there's a lot of activity here to support it. And it's good to hear that there's some loan programs and tax incentives available as well to help support folks who want to venture out and get involved as far as building out the infrastructure for urban ag. I guess, Kevin, kind of coming back here to just a little bit as far as just your background here in finance and tech startups, and just looking at how has that experience really shaped the way you approach funding and scaling urban farming projects as far as in your region here?
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, you're always cash strapped usually, even as you have raised a lot of money. You're kind of battling to sustainability. And when you're doing that, you have to use every penny effectively. So just as an operator, that's something that you ingrain in your DNA. In the urban farming game, you need to make every cent count. You have to be extremely resourceful because a lot of the things that you need in the garden, sometimes you'll never be able to pay for them, like volunteer work. having 30 corporate volunteers would effectively, pay for a number of hours of labor on my team that I normally would have to pay for. So being able to be resourceful and kind of look out at what are those non-cash opportunities that you can use to be able to be resourceful and have your gardens thrive. I'm using that all day, every day. So that's actually why I like doing it, is I find that to be quite entrepreneurial. And you have to always find ways to make the garden sustain. Something that you touched on earlier is actually important. So I'm going to kind of make this point and then turn it back over to you.
Sure.
When there, or maybe Matthew was the one that made the point on, there are a number of grants usually available for starting gardens. It's really pretty easy to get a garden started, and we encourage that. But what tends to happen is that oftentimes a community volunteer, someone that's very interested or passionate, will be the receiver of that grant. And what happens if or when that person gets called away? They may move, they may have a life event. If they're older, sometimes they pass away. And so that usually is when we see that they're, like in the case of our, a retirement, we see that if there was not an entity like ourselves to be able to fill the gap, then usually that destroys its permanence. In good growing environments, untended gardens will just grow on themselves and essentially fall apart within a season or two. And so that's where being able to maintain them and have groups to be able to maintain them becomes quite important. And that's where making every penny counts matters.
Yeah, definitely. I was going over to India here a little bit. I'm going to switch up here a little bit. Thanks, Kevin, for the input here. What's been the biggest surprise or the biggest lesson you've learned from working with urban growers and seeing Cleveland's neighborhoods, really develop and grow in this space here?
So one of the biggest surprises for me was the number of urban farms, the number of public gardens, the number of city gardens. So the number of these like growing spaces that I've been seeing popping up around Cleveland, even over the course of like a few months, like, oh, a few months ago that wasn't there. And then I guess the rapidity of creating these spaces, of growing these spaces, of reclaiming these spaces that were just formerly abandoned and growing something and making them productive. So growing these formerly empty lots, which I love that these spaces aren't just sitting there and they're becoming productive, but also when, flying a drone, getting these aerial views, being 200, 300, 400 feet in the air. I also notice large swaths of the city are still brown and gray. You get to certain areas of the city and there might be a tree in an acre or two, maybe. That was something that was a little shocking to me because I'm, used to seeing, lines of trees in places and, grass and lawns, even if, not really growing any food or anything like that, but just green. And then I get to these areas and it's like, oh, that's just so much washed out brown and gray, which is kind of surprising to me. Because I know, I think it's Atlanta. I don't remember. One of them is called the Green City. So apparently, it's this large urban area with so much green. Like they're like, oh yeah, there's this green everywhere. And I've never visited, but I know I have family who live there. I know people who live there. And like, yes, it's so much green. It's like greener than Cleveland. And I'm like, oh, well, I kind of want that for Cleveland. I don't want to be surprised by all this brown and gray. So I think, especially when you get to, poor areas of the city, areas that aren't as much of a focus for development, I think these gardens, these farms are good ways to help green the spaces a lot more. So yeah, that was just kind of surprising to see that contrast of having these things pop up, but then also still having these brown spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can be surprising as far as that. Maybe with some increased activity, we'll see some changes happening, and then also, given the available properties out there, then you there's going to be a tendency to probably have more undeveloped space. But as you get more development, maybe that will help, and we'll see enhancement along those lines. Matt, just kind of going over to you here. Looking at development projects and collaborations, what do you think? Are there opportunities there? What kinds of development projects or collaborations you think hold the promise for integrating food, technology, and real estate that will benefit the neighborhoods long term.
Yeah, I think one collaboration that I'd really like to highlight is Cuyahoga County's Office of Small Business. And in the Office of Small Business, we connect small business owners, including those who are working in food and agricultural spaces, with the resources that they need to grow their business. We do this through what are called 30-minute listening sessions, where we invite the small business owner to tell us all about their businesses, what opportunities they're pursuing, what challenges they're facing, and where they think they could use a little bit of help. We then use the information that we got on the call to connect them with a local small business support organization. Those can include lenders, business advisors, MBE, WB, VB certification experts, workforce development organizations, groups that help them put together a business plan or to become bankable, all sorts of different small business support services that might be available out in the community. We then connect them via a warm email introduction and allow them to work with this small business support service that they might not have been aware of before. It's really a low barrier way for entrepreneurs to get plugged into the ecosystem. And when you think about the intersection of food, technology, and real estate, supporting a small businesses is key. So whether you're running a vertical farm, building a new piece of agricultural technology, or launching a neighborhood grocery store, there are community resources which could support you, which the Office of Small Business could help connect you with.
Yeah, and that's great. And just to add on to what Matt mentioned earlier, for those who may not necessarily be familiar with the whole ecosystem here, Matt mentioned as far as MBE, WBE, as far as there's a number of certifications that companies can qualify for within Cuyahoga County, the city of Cleveland here, that would give you opportunities to bid on contract work. So those are just some of the areas as far as being a woman-owned business, a minority-owned business, a veteran-owned business. Those can be areas where there may be potential contract opportunities available. The second piece he mentioned along the lines of really kind of the support that's available as far as SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, that are available. Besides the support provided by the county, then there's availability with other centers that support small businesses with your business plan, and also looking at financing and funding to support. So in the area of ag, there's opportunities available as well there. And so there's a big ecosystem. And so Matt is really encouraging you to explore. You can come to that front door to Cuyahoga County and have a listening session, and they can point you to the appropriate resources that are available. Definitely, there's a lot of partners available to collaborate with and support you. You don't have to do it on your own, is really the point I want to really emphasize here. I've heard from a number of urban farmers here. They've done great jobs getting there, but there's also a supportive network that's available as well. And so we encourage you to really ask questions and inquire. Kevin, kind of coming back to you here. In your view, what are the biggest challenges for urban farmers when it comes to adopting new technology? We're an organization that gets involved and kind of helps facilitate that space here. And, how do you help communities really overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about money earlier. So, I mean, when you're talking about urban farming and technology adoption, usually there is going to need to be some sort of sponsorship. But there is a lot of interest. So, where I'm going to go with your answer, because there's grants available, and usually actually quite a number of grants available that you could just Google or find within your network. And I kind of find that those grants that are often available range in the $25,000 or less category. So, when you're talking about 25 grand for labor and equipment, that can definitely get you some good stuff for farming. But, I'm not sure where like drone pricing is, but presumably greenhouses and controlled environment agriculture units, that higher end tech, it is just more expensive. So now we're talking about large scale grants. And that's where I think that there is opportunities within a lot of communities for those types of partners. Let's just call them green industry partners, large scale, and I'm going to use USDA as a specific reference. Large scale USDA grants are still, available. Certain climate grants from the EPA and others have largely gone away for the time being, but USDA grants, large ones, are still available. And the ones that I've seen most recently that actually the application window is closed, they focus a lot on regional food partnerships. And we submitted an application, which of course I hope is strong enough to win, but I think it would have been a lot stronger if there had been more of an offensive strategy amongst several partners who had already agreed to go after the larger grants. Instead of us all kind of like, hey, fire drilling last minute, hey, do you want to apply for this grant? Which is what we did. And there is always interest of like, sure, what can we do? But I think if there was more thought in, again, offensive strategy put in place amongst strong and key partners within a region, then you can really strongly go after these grants that typically I find are available if you just get the application right. I mean, when it comes to USDA grants, you just have to tediously follow the rules. But once you do and you have a strong application, from what I have seen from others, you have a better chance of getting it than even some of the smaller ones you apply for by yourself. So that's where I would say I think there's some opportunity on the funding side to put large equipment purchase into those grants and then maybe even have a couple of partners share it to maximize its utility.
Yeah. And you hit, just for folks who may not be familiar with USDA, it's U.S. Department of Ag here, just to spell out the acronyms here. Sometimes we take for granted that everyone knows the acronyms, but federal agency here, Focus on Ag, offers numerous programs, federally supported programs that Kevin is speaking about here. I'm going to step away a little bit here and ask India kind of as a for-profit founder of a for-profit business here, and I know she's been involved as far as looking at funding opportunities here from a, tech company that's involved in development. Where do you look as far as funding opportunities? I think it would be applicable for the innovators who are involved in ag, just to hear your experience and where the potential opportunities lie.
Wow, I've been kind of all over the place looking at different kinds of funding. So initially being in tech and being, having a startup essentially with this platform, I looked at VC funding. And I went through like all these different accelerators, all these different programs. They're like, this is how you apply for VC funding. Like, this is how you go after it. This is how you position yourself to be fundable, all these different things. And so like all of that kind of information, I figured out, well, okay, I don't want to do that actually. So then I decided, okay, well, let's take a look at other options. So I looked at grants, I looked at pitches, I looked at local opportunities. So one of the things that have been really helpful for me is looking at local opportunities. So Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, Northern Ohio, Ohio in general. I've found that the chances that you have of getting funding is much higher in like your local space. So instead of looking nationally, alternatively, looking in very niche spaces is useful as well. So if you're doing a very niche thing and you kind of find a program that, something very specific, like I found one that was, AI and ecology, AI and food production, AI and conservation. And it's like, oh, okay, that's very specific, to increase your chances of actually getting that funding. But then also, not forgetting that loans are a thing. And historically, that's how people have funded their business. But being very careful and financially responsible about, pursuing loans. So typically when I look at loans, I'm looking at interest rate first and foremost. So finding those no interest, low interest loans to help fund your endeavors, I think is also a great way to fund the business, your business, your agriculture business, your farm, whatever it may be.
So, and I guess for folks who aren't familiar with the space here, and I'm going to ask this question, for you, India here, they hear loans, they say, shoot, I don't want to put my, my property up as collateral. I may end up losing, my property here. So what types of loans are you looking at here? And then I guess on the flip side here, kind of twofold to this question, grants, typically most of the time then folks would think of grants just being available for nonprofits. I think you've gone down the path, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've pursued, SBIR as a small business innovation research program, the federal level, as far as I think maybe you've gone after USDA, SBIR, and then also kind of locally, you've looked at what the Glide Innovation Fund as well. So, could you share a little bit kind of as far as I asked two parts to this question, just knowing a little bit about your background experience, but share with the podcast audience from, what you've gone through and what you've looked at.
Yes. So I did get Glide funding. That was the first big funding that I got, and really what got us to our software platform. And that process is, at least it was when I did it, very BC-like. So, you have a pitch deck, which is something I generally recommend everybody has, even if you're not going for BC funding. Have your concept, your ideas, your financial model, all of these things kind of together in one place that you can show to potential funders, regardless of the space that those funders are in, including loans. So they have an idea of what you're working on and see that you've thought these things through. You thought through your model. Also, I've applied for, like you said, SBIR, STTR, both actually, so SBIR and STTR. And they're long involved processes, but they essentially, are grants. You don't pay them back, which is very nice. And having that information about your project, your financials, your concept, all of these things together makes applying for those kinds of things a lot easier because you kind of already have that information. You just got to put it together in the form of an application. But yeah, no, I've done pitches on stages, and that's helped me, especially in the beginning, to get, just the funding I needed to get off the ground. Glide funding was a large injection that helped build the platform. Cyber Sitters, SBIRs, TTRs to help fund research and development, grants, and then also thinking about loans. So a lot of people think two things. So one, when it comes to grants, they're only for nonprofits. They're not. So I'm a for-profit. I've applied only for grants for for-profits, and I've won grants that were built for for-profits. And it's something we're seeing a little bit more, I think, than we used to, that there are these opportunities available, sometimes only for for-profits. I mean, I've seen more and more grants that are only for for-profits. So there are those funds out there, and sometimes they're funds actually by corporations. So people think, oh, corporations only fund nonprofits. That's not entirely true, especially if your mission is for social good, environmental good, responsible use of AI, things that are going to help communities. They're more willing to have these funds for profits with these kinds of missions. And then thinking about loans, most of the loans I've seen, and definitely the ones I've pursued, you do not have to put up any kind of personal collateral. You don't put up your car, you don't put up your house. For me, that's definitely not something I'm willing to do. I typically don't recommend to people that they do that, because there are options that don't require that. Low interest, no interest loans. They might look at your personal finances as part of it to determine whether or not you get the loan. They might only look at the business finances. But a lot of the ones I've looked at, they don't ask you to put up, your personal property.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I was, asking that question because we may have listeners out here who are for the first time running a business and they hadn't thought about it, or they know the perception of having a loan. And typically, in a lot of cases, from a personal standpoint, then, they may be looking for some personal collateral or even some business assets to get the funding. And so it's refreshing, and I'm sure for them, it could be of interest to them to maybe pursue that route for getting funding to expand and grow. The last thing, I'll go over to Matt here, but really as far as the grant areas that you've been involved in, it's been dollars and funding that's available for-profit small businesses. SBIR, STTR, Small Business Innovation Research Program, STTR, the Small Business Tech Transfer Program. Parallax supports organizations who look to pursue that type of funding. And, it's kind of separate part of the work that we do. But I just wanted to share with folks, there are opportunities if you are a small business and you're looking to take an idea that may be able to meet the needs of the federal government or dual use, have the ability to help consumer businesses or actual other businesses. There's funding available to help you take that idea to market. That's really the goal of the program. In other cases, then there's also research that's available because our public dollars have supported that at our federal government lab entities. That may be a way also to engage and implement solutions as well to help you become more efficient or really, handle some challenges that you may be looking at here. So those are all avenues as well. Going over to Kevin here a little bit, I want to stick to the funding piece here. Cuyahoga County, I know definitely you have, Office of Small Business, and then the county itself, as far as the Economic Development Department, has a number of programs as well. We have engaged as far as our organization in just helping you get the word out. So I wanted to ask, as far as for urban farmers, if I'm an urban farmer or someone who's interested in that space, what types of programs does Cuyahoga County have available that organizations can pursue?
So, full admission, we're not based out of Cuyahoga County, so I'm not entirely sure how to answer the question. But what I would say is that most either offices of sustainability, whether that's through a city or even a local neighborhood, the Office of Small Business, as was mentioned earlier, and then FSAs, like farming service agencies or farming service organizations, they locally will often, along with offices of environment and conservation, they're often going to be those grant originators. So we've talked again a lot about grants and a lot about their support organizations. They tend to come from one of those types of entities. What I would suggest for the listeners is just find out who's working there and see how to get involved with them, because almost all of those offices will be short-staffed. There are people that will be at the center of a lot of information, and they will have access maybe to some dollars, but most likely they will have some limitations about all the work that they can do. And so that's where, a private entity, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, the closer that you get to those individuals, usually they will make either a suggestion about what is available or about what is about to become available. And the earlier you get on that funding cycle and really support cycle, the more that people think of you again, and it becomes self-reinforcing.
Yeah, that's good. And Matt, I want to go over to you and just ask you, as far as from a Cuyahoga County perspective, what opportunities are available as well as far as within Cuyahoga County, looking from a funding perspective?
Yeah, so it's going to depend on the scale of the business who's approaching the county and the scale of the project that they have. So for a smaller scale urban farm, the best bet would probably be to reach out to our Office of Small Business, set up a listening session so that we can get them connected with whatever small business support service they might need. That could be a smaller grant-making institution. That could be a business advisor helping them get everything set up. It could be helping them identify other sources of funding which are available in the community. In terms of getting funding directly from Cuyahoga County through the Department of Development, it would typically need to be a larger scale project, and those are out there. So if you are building like a vertical farm or greenhouses, the county does have below market interest rate financing. So our policy rate right now is 5.5%. We can lend up to 40% of the cost of a project, and we can take a subordinated financing position. So we can, take a second position behind a private lender. And we can go up to 90% loan to value on our loans. And we can support anything from a real estate development. So if you were building something like a vertical farm or a greenhouse, we can also support or finance the purchase of machinery and equipment. So if you had something like drones, for example, that might be something that we could finance the purchase of.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm going to switch it over, and I think, one of the questions here, and I think you'll touch on this a little bit, but just in terms of you know, for urban farmers, typically a lot of times they start off independent, thinking about their business idea. But it's really a network out here. So key partnerships, key collaborations. If someone's an urban farmer, and I'm kind of going to pass it on to each one of you all, what's the key collaborations or partnerships they should be looking at? I'll start with you, Kevin, as far as that. What advice could you give them along those lines?
Absolutely. I mean, the first one, honestly, it's with the neighborhood and the neighbors that will be your volunteers, because you want and need your local residents to take pride and really to fill in the garden. Otherwise, kind of what are you doing it for? So that's the first thing that I would say, is just making sure that you're, whether it's you as a person or you as an entity, are making that garden welcoming for folks to be able to come in and give of their time and service. That's the first one. And then secondarily, I mean, kind of with a similar answer, usually that means that there's going to be other friendly organizations that are probably in very close physical proximity to you. The larger the projects in your local proximity, the more you tend to be doing the same projects with the same organizations. And over time, that just builds a kinship. And I'll give you an example again from where we are. Keep Cincinnati Beautiful is an organization that does what it sounds like. They exist to be able to beautify the city, ensure that certain larger scale projects are done. And so now this year, we're probably on our third or fourth project with them, and we just got a $25,000 grant from them to be able to hire youth to employ them during the summer in our gardens, not only to keep our gardens beautified and flowing, but to give them jobs, legitimate jobs. And so that's where the partnership with Keep Cincinnati Beautiful is just, we might not have thought of them as wonderful partners for us initially, but they are. And so now that we've done more and more work together, it just becomes easier to see when we can do those partnerships.
Yeah. And you hit on a key point, and I think we only touched upon that, the whole talent piece in this space. We talk in terms of entrepreneurs kind of, starting off the businesses, but it's also the talent piece as well. And those offer potential partnerships and collaboration opportunities as well within the urban ag space.
No doubt about it. No doubt.
So same question for you, India, here. Just really looking at, key partnerships, key collaborations. What kind of guidance would you give to someone who's maybe in your shoes here, or based upon your experience, who wants to engage in urban farming?
I think for me, networking. So, one of the like coming from a technology and ecology space, I have this understanding of, tech. I have this understanding of ecology and environmental spaces and natural spaces, and this understanding that a lot of problems overlap. And then a lot of the drone tech, a lot of things we do in natural spaces can also be used in agriculture. So I wanted to fill that gap. It's like, okay, well, I don't know about agriculture. I don't know about farming, I don't know about growing things. So my primary focus was, learning about agriculture and growing and, kind of, plants and systems in this space, coming from conservation. So I found um, urban farmers, different kind of coalitions that they had formed. I knew a few people who knew urban farmers, so I reached out to them like, "Hey, can you connect me with such and such?" And then they would tell me about a meetup or a networking thing, a whole project going on to connect urban farmers across Cleveland. So I went to some of their events. I talked to people. I talked to people at the USDA. Sometime there would be USDA representatives at some of the environmental conferences I went to. So I just started talking to people and making connections. It's like start with the people you know and who they know, and then find events, find conferences, and just make yourself known. Like let people know what you do, what you're interested in. Like maybe you're a technologist who's interested in doing work in agriculture or urban farming. Maybe you want to actually start your own farm. And that's a whole thing too, because you don't just wake up one day and boom, you have a farm. As someone who is started a garden this year and realized how hard it is to grow anything intentionally. I had to refer to books, I had to talk to people, and I'm like, oh, this is really difficult. So I think talking to people who are already doing it is really, really helpful and will provide a lot of guidance. And also help prevent you making different missteps that, you don't necessarily have to make. And this is true for any field. So yeah, just talking to people, like getting out there, going to events and making yourself known and what it is you want to do.
Great, great. Yeah, and Matt, I'm going to ask you, and you may take a different perspective here. I know you mentioned as far as, Cuyahoga County having an office of small business, some of the other municipalities, kind of that's the starting point. But if they're interested in more as far as urban farmer, maybe they don't have the infrastructure in place. They want to acquire some property or they're evaluating. Where would they go? I mean, who would be a key partner? Who would be a key collaborator? Besides kind of starting with a listening session with, your team in offices, with the county here.
Well, I actually think that that would be the best place for them to go to, and it would be the County Office of Small Business. And the reason for that is that every entrepreneur, every new urban farmer, or even existing urban farmer is going to have slightly different needs. And so through that listening session, we're going to be able to offer a bespoke solution that actually meets the specific needs that they require. So if they need financing, if they need to know where to, I don't know, purchase machinery and equipment, if they need help legally structuring their business, we'll be able to point them in the right direction. I think it would be difficult to say that there's one organization who we would refer everyone to. So by acting as that kind of top of the funnel, the Office of Small Business allows us to connect small business owners with the specific resource that meets their specific need.
Yeah, and that's spot on. You all have a front door. The county has a front door for small businesses to go to, or as you described it, a top of the funnel to go, and then you can kind of point based upon their respective needs and interests, et cetera, here. So that's excellent to know, and good to see that can be a pathway for collaboration here. So I'm gonna ask here, kind of closing out here, really, for each of you all, kind of one question here. Really, and this is kind of looking forward here as far as potential engagement. I think all of you have the respective efforts. I think Matt hit it here earlier as far as how people can really work with them. But I guess, looking forward, if you could wave a magic wand here and change one thing to help, maybe potential engagement as far as within Cleveland or within your respective region, the local food systems to thrive, what would it be? What could be one item just to kind of really enhance that engagement? I'll start with you, Kevin, here. I know you're working in the Cincinnati region here, but what could, you do as far as along that lines? What would be one thing to change?
Yeah, I have an idea. It's called Institutions Buy Local, and it's as simple as I hope that it sounds. We as consumers have been suggested and encouraged to buy from local small businesses for years, and we still should. But our institutions are the ones that actually have major purchasing power. And when I say institutions, that ranges from a college and a university to our local municipalities to school districts, amusement parks, sports stadiums. Anyone that is going to be buying a lot of the salad spectrum should really be considering buying it locally, because the data would suggest if you're able to get about 4% of the food that you are buying made, run, grown, whatever the right word is, locally, then it actually keeps your dollars in your economy instead of exporting it out. And so our suggestion is actually at a mass scale, let's pool those contracts together so that we can create legitimate jobs that are serviced locally in our neighborhoods through the infrastructure that we are already setting up. And once you're able to do that, now you're talking about a more sustainable system and circular system as we would think of it. So that kind of is what our goal is to not only set up and get these flywheel circular networks going, but then start to avail those options to the bigger buyers and turning that into genuine economic benefit.
Great, great. Yeah, and India, kind of along those lines. I mean, what is, if you could wait that one, what is kind of one thing that you see from your observations that could help bring change to, Cleveland's local food systems and really help it thrive here?
One of the things I thought about, and it might be too fantastical or too solar punk, but I like to see more verticality in the local food system. So, we build housing, business centers, even, shopping, entertainment centers with verticality in mind. We have whether it's 2 floors or whether it's 50 floors. I think optimizing the use of space would just multiply that output for, square acre or two. And then at those increasing heights, we're talking 10 floors, 15, 20 floors. We even begin to think about drones for maintenance. So they can get up there really easily, they can be really small. But I think having that verticality just makes a really great use of, sometimes, small spaces, quarter acre lots. And that's something I would like to see more.
Right, right. Yeah, and Matt, I know as far as your perspective and where you sit, but just curious as far as you had any input here, what is one thing that could really kind of helps, Cleveland's local food system thrive? What would be the change that you would, like to see if you could control that?
Yeah,
It's kind of wishful thinking.
if I had the magic wand and I can make one change to Northeast Ohio's food system, I would actually change land use policy. So, City of Cleveland adopted an urban agricultural overlay district, which allows farming as a principal use on any vacant residential lots. I think that that's great. That's smart place-based policy. But not only in Cleveland, but throughout the region, I would personally pair that with another zoning reform, and that would be allowing greater housing density near grocery stores. Now, we didn't talk so much during this podcast about the final delivery of food. We're much more on the production side. But I think that that would be a game changer for people. So first, it would reduce the number of people living in food deserts by bringing them within walking distance of fresh food. And second, it would make grocery stores a more viable business. Right now, cities often have to subsidize grocery stores to ensure that they stay open. And there's good reason to do this. Grocery stores are like a key pivotal piece of infrastructure in a community, but economic developers in Northeast Ohio often, have to commit scarce public dollars to subsidizing these to make sure that they stay open. If we allowed more housing to be built near the stores themselves, we would grow their customer base, making them more sustainable with less public subsidy. And this would allow us to get more bang for fewer bucks.
Right, right. Isn't it twofold here? I mean, I'm asking kind of out loud too. Is it incentives also for the retailers, the folks who are putting stores up to also build near, housing areas as well? And so it could be on the flip side as well. And I'm not sure as far as the financial outlook, but just curious along those lines.
Yeah, certainly. I think everybody would benefit from that. So the residents would be closer to the services that they need, and then the businesses would be closer to their customers, and their customers would be able to purchase from them more easily. So I think it would benefit everyone involved.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Last call, I'm going to kind of put this out, we can go round robin here. Any parting advice?
I would just say make sure to use this as an impetus of conversation amongst the people that care about the same topic. If you're listening to this podcast and you really think that you want to get involved, not only talk to others about it, but look up our websites, get in touch. We are people that are boots on the ground every day. And I find that people that are in this industry are very genuine and very willing to help. So that's where if this is something that you are interested in, you don't necessarily know where to get started, just ask. And I find that people are very accommodating to make the right suggestions, to listen to how much or how little you want to be involved and kind of gently push you in the right direction. So get involved, stay in touch, and make sure to keep the conversation going, and it will.
I'd had a very similar piece of parting advice, and that was to start by tapping into the regional economic development ecosystem. There are so many incredible organizations doing work in Northeast Ohio, and whether you're an entrepreneur or nonprofit or policymaker, there's somebody out there who can help you with whatever you're doing. And if you're not sure where to begin, and your organization has fewer than 500 employees, you can consider scheduling a listening session with Cuyahoga County's Office of Small Business, a simple way to start building connections and getting the support that can move your vision forward.
Yeah, so the definition of a small business here, Matt just mentioned as far as the cutoff here. So in a lot of cases, you may not think that you're qualified as a small business, but you are as far as on that definition, 500 employees or less. So keep that in mind if you're interested in a listening session.
Yep, and that's nonprofit and for-profit.
Oh, wow. Okay. Nonprofit and for. So great opportunity. India, any other parting advice here? I know you mentioned as far as networking as a key here, mentioned as far as funding, anything else here before we close?
Yeah, no, in addition to, the networking piece and just talking to people, like, kind of broaden out to the kind of networking events you're going to. Like I went to an opening for a restaurant for like, 20, 30, 40s professionals and got connected to a drone program that was working with kids and they needed instructors. And I'm like, hey, cool. So I had a whole like project come out of that. Um, I think that's a big one. And then also those people can connect you too to additional funding opportunities. So it all is kind of connected. But honestly, I also have like one really simple piece of advice. Um, just try and grow something. Like try and grow something. Try and grow a garden, whether it's on a balcony or in your yard. It really increases your appreciation for farmers, for food, how hard it can be to grow stuff, especially at scale, even if that scale is an acre. Um, and you learn a lot. You learn a lot by doing it. And I think too, maybe for people who don't want to dive into the deep end and become an urban farmer, you learn about the issues that they face. You get connected, you ask questions. But I think just trying to grow something increases that appreciation and will just give you ideas about things you could do.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good closing point here. I want to thank you all, Kevin, Matt, India, for really, sharing your stories, sharing your insights and your vision to help, contribute towards Cleveland's food tech future here. It's really inspiring to see how local leaders like you are growing resilient communities from the ground up and from the sky above. Well, loyal listeners, that's it for this season of Tech to Table, Growing Cleveland's Future. Stay connected with the Precision Urban Agricultural Initiative by visiting oai.org and keep planting seeds for change. Until next time, thank you.